You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
You're listening to Mission Log the Orville, an episode-by-episode discussion of the adventures of the crew of the USS Orville.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log the Orville, this week twice in a lifetime. The one where the Aeronav device gets a major upgrade and Jack McBrayer and Johnny Knoxville argue about the meaning of pay-per-view. We'll discuss the meanings, morals, and messages to see if that new Chuck Lorre series is going to make it or not. And to see if this Orville episode aligns with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. My name is Jessica Lynn Verdi.
Yes, it is, and I'm Mike Richards. Mission Log the Orville is a conversation that depends on your participation. Share your thoughts, ideas, and tell us what we missed at ML_the Orville on Twitter, Mission Log Pod on Facebook. You can email us at missionlog-the-orville@roddenberry.com. And if you're watching this on the Roddenberry YouTube channel, hit like and subscribe. And remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode. In fact, on Reddit, Frank Ferengi said, I'm fond of this podcast. Yeah, he said, I'm fond of this podcast, and driving a bunch, I have become something of a podcast snob, deciding which ones make the cut for me to listen to. These hosts have become sort of my imaginary friends discussing the episodes. Heck, my biggest complaint is that when they had Seth on, they didn't talk merchandise. I need my Halloween costumes, action figures, and nerdy t-shirts.
We also got a message from David Bloomberg on Twitter, who has a couple of questions that I think you and I will get into about today's episode, aka wanting to know, why did Ed and Kelly tell the family that they were planning to erase them and just didn't go quietly and do it? Also, why didn't they use this solution to begin with? I know there's no story if they do, but from a logical perspective, they shouldn't have bothered messing around in 2025 at all. I have some thoughts.
If this was an episode of how it should have ended, it would have been a pretty quick episode.
Hey, listen, there's a whole series begging to be, like, it's like Romeo and Juliet, where, you know, Mercutio goes, hey, Romeo, you want to go to this party? He's like, no, I don't feel like it. And then the whole thing never happens.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, exactly.
Meh. Anyway, let's get into this recap, yeah?
All right, here's Jessica recapping Twice in a Lifetime.
Well, Gordon is hosting a little shindig at his place and is singing All I Have to Say for his guests. You know that song, right? It's his and his digitally simulated 21st century girlfriend song. Anyway, Isaac gets cold-shouldered by Charlie Burke, and John helps him out by explaining his approach is all wrong and teaches him socializing 101. If you want to talk to people, ask them about themselves. After evading Isaac, Charlie notices a strange device on Gordon's desk and learns it's a cell phone, also digitally recreated and once belonging to Laura Huggins, a woman Gordon fell in love with 400 years after she lived. A wistful Gordon then invites Charlie and a befuddled Bortus to take the obligatory selfie. John Lamar and Isaac's pet project in the Aeronav device has seen two major breakthroughs. The field of operation for the device could potentially grant time travel to the entire ship. Not only that, they can pinpoint the exact time they want to travel. The theory is demonstrated by Gordon's egg salad sandwich and also warns of the danger. A disruption in a particular sequence of events would create a temporal paradox and cause an entirely new universe to split off. While this technological advancement in time travel is exciting, Admiral Ted Danson says what we're all thinking. It'd be better if they hadn't achieved this at all. The device can be weaponized and now needs to be conveyed to a maximum security research station on Sabak 3. It would appear that maximum security means nothing, as proved by the devastation they find at what should have been the research station. Somehow, the Kaylon intercepted a message about the Aeronav device and are prepared to take it by force. Admiral Ozawa commands a full retreat before there are more losses and dictates to hide in the Veil Nebula. Before the Orville can jump to Quantum, they are caught in a Kaylon tractor beam. Despite the threats, Ed Mercer tells them that they will destroy the Aeronav device if they don't let them go, but the Kaylon are not cowed. Ed commands the destruction of the device, and it seems that Gordon is the one for the job. Isaac suggests that a forced overload of the deflector array should be enough to disrupt the tractor beam, and John is commanded to overload the quantum core to do so. Gordon takes aim at the device, but the quantum core overloads and seemingly causes the Aeronav set-off device to shoot a shockwave at Gordon instead. The Orville is free from the Kaylon grasp, and they head for the nebula. No sign of Gordon exists, and just as the crew begins to scratch their collective head, they receive a call from the man himself. Gordon has calculated the exact position of where the Orville should be if they survived the Kaylon attack. He is currently on Earth in the year 2015 and has been trapped there for 6 months. If they happen to find themselves in the neighborhood, Gordon would love it if they could pick him up. A quick search proves that a one Gordon Malloy did live and die in the 21st century. And that brings up a few time travel questions, which, as John Lamar puts it, are muddy. But what isn't unclear are temporal laws. If you're caught in the past, you make yourself invisible. If Gordon is essentially Googleable, it would seem he did the exact opposite. With all hands on deck, John, Isaac, a will, and a way successfully send the Orville back in time. But they missed the mark by a bit. According to their calculations, Gordon will have been in the past for 10 years. Not to mention the Dysonium fuel is completely depleted, so they're also stuck. Isaac determines that with the help of Charlie Burke, he'll be able to extract Dysonium from the Earth's core without disrupting future events, and Kelly and Ed decide to contact Gordon to see how he is faring. Ed and Kelly find Gordon at an airport shortly after landing a plane, and as Gordon sees them crossing the airfield, it's almost like a dream. After apologizing for arriving late, Ed and Kelly tell Gordon that they're going to try and get him home. His response is to take them for a drive. As Ed and Kelly try to describe the temporal laws Gordon has broken, he stops them and tells them he has no intention of going back with them. He takes them into his home to meet his family, his kid, Edward Jr., and his wife, Laura Huggins. Isaac and Charlie are a ways away from the nearest Dysonium deposit, and in a moment of quick thinking, Charlie drags Isaac into a biker bar in order to acquire transportation. She bets the most insecure biker there that her brother Isaac can beat the strongest guy there in an arm wrestling battle, and if Isaac wins, they get their bikes. After Isaac wins the thumb war, Charlie and him hit the open road. Sitting down to lunch with Gordon's family, Laura recounts how she and Gordon met. Despite him having the advantage over her, it's clear that Laura loves Gordon as much as he loves her. Speaking of love, when we check in to see how the Orville is doing on the far side of the moon, it would appear that Tala Lamar's ship is sailing. Ed and Kelly go to the playroom to read Gordon the Riot Act. He's broken so many temporal laws, but Gordon will have none of it. He did what he was supposed to do for 3 years. He hid away in a cabin and stayed out of sight. It almost drove him crazy, and he resolved to make some sort of life for himself. He found Laura, and now that he has a life that he loves, it doesn't matter what laws he's broken. They took too long. He's happy here, and he doesn't want to go back to the Orville. Ed and Kelly leave, and Gordon comes clean with Laura. He is indeed a man from the stars, and while it's a lot to unpack, in her heart, she says she always kind of knew. He tells her that they want to take him back, and when she asks him what he wants, he says that he wants her. The Dysonium deposits lie directly beneath a house for sale in the suburbs. Charlie and Isaac must pretend to be a young couple in search of their first home when a pesky realtor shows up out of nowhere. They ask for some space when they reach the basement to discuss their feelings and begin to work quickly in order to extract the Dysonium. As the two expertly navigate the drill, Isaac once again tries to strike up a conversation with Charlie, who's pretty sick of it. She asks him why he is so keen on wanting to talk to her, to which he replies that he's never had the opportunity to thank her for saving his life. She is not interested, and explained that while she might have saved his life, he ruined a chance of her actually having one. That by enabling the Kaylon to murder thousands of people, her friend Amanda being one of them, an opportunity of happiness is forever out of Charlie's reach. She never told Amanda how she truly felt, and now she never can. Charlie's inability to accept Isaac's gratitude does not stop him from feeling it. With the Dysonium properly extracted, Charlie and Isaac leave the house abruptly and tell the nosy realtor that they just broke up. Ed and Kelly arrive at Gordon's doorstep that evening with Tala now in tow. They are there to take Gordon electively or by force. Gordon will go, but only if he can take his family. And that's going to be a no from Captain Ed. Gordon draws his weapon on Ed and crew and threatens them with the door or the floor. If they try to take him, he'll stun them, and they'll go so deep into hiding they'll never be able to find them. When Isaac hails Ed to let them know that they've secured the Dysonium, Ed tells Gordon that they'll see him soon. They'll see him in the year 2015, when Gordon wants them to rescue him. Gordon begs Ed not to do this, to not take his family away. Ed says goodbye, They leave as Gordon follows after them, weapon drawn. He lowers it in defeat and returns to his distraught family. Laura asks what's going to happen to them, and Gordon tells them that no matter what, he loves them, that their family is stronger than time. If only that were true. The crew gears up to travel 10 more years in the past, and while it's not a bullseye, they're close and are able to pick Gordon up before he meets Laura, before he has his family, and before he gives up hope on the Orville coming to rescue him. The most recent jump into the past fried the Aronov device and effectively strands the Orville yet again, but John Lamar realizes that they are in fact in a time machine, that if they travel at the speed of light, remove the dampeners on the ship that make it so they don't experience the space-time continuum, Einstein can do his thing and they can fly into the future. Charlie plots a course, Isaac figures out the math, and they head for a star that's nearly 200 light years away. After traveling through some red, blues, and greens, and about 200 years later, they reach the star, turn around, and head back to Earth. Gordon types in Isaac's presets, they drop out of time travel, and end up right where they belong. After a couple rounds of straight bourbons, Ed and Kelly explain to Gordon all they went through to bring him back. Gordon tells them that they did the right thing, but he can't even imagine how hard it must have been. Nothing will avail Ed and Kelly of their guilt and their sadness for two children that will never be born. But the timeline is intact, I guess. Kelly realizes that it's been ages since the three of them have sat down with a round of drinks, and the trio endeavors to upend 3 bottles before the night is through. Let's raise a glass to Laura, friends. The end. Aww.
Very nicely done. So, couple of things right off the bat from the recap, and you recapped it perfectly. But from the show, 300 years, 400 years, tomato.
They say it.
Yeah, because this was 2115. When they initially met in Lasting Impressions. You know, when Laura's phone was from 2015. Excuse me, 2015, and 400 years later is 24. Mid-teens, so that was 400 years after Laura, not 300 years, like you said, unless maybe Laura lived for another 100 years,
But they did say 300 years.
They did.
In the past.
You recapped it perfectly. It was kind of like that Star Trek II Khan thing. These men took a pledge to live and die 200 years before you were born. Well, it was 300 Khan, so, whatever. He's got
space brain.
He's got SETI Alpha 5 insanity or something going on, space brain.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, but great recap. Episode written by Seth MacFarlane and directed by John Cassar. This was interesting. I came across this on the Trek Zone. John Cassar was to speak about the third season of the Orville, New Horizons. Or I should say the first season of the Orville, New Horizons. Third season of the Orville. And he said new restrictions and scheduling conflicts due to COVID-19, as well as 3 pregnant co-stars. I didn't know that, but whatever.
I didn't know that.
We can guess who, I guess. Seasons 3, the last 5 episodes were shot all at once, shot at the same time, which was unprecedented and a surprising move. He said it's unbelievably difficult, but we're doing it and we're holding on to the tone.
I believe Tom said something about that.
Yeah,
too.
he talked about that stacking, I think he called it, when we brought him in, and it said despite the fact that Cassar or MacFarlane will be credited with either episode. This kind of goes back to my flub on the first episode when we talked about Electric Sheep, when I credited that to John Cassar when it was actually Seth MacFarlane.
I don't think that was your flub. I think it said John Cassar
it was
on
a
the
flub,
Hulu.
You know what, Jess? It was a
release.
flub because I was at the premiere and I read directed by Seth MacFarlane on IMAX.
We talked about that, though, because on the Hulu release, it said John Cassar.
Correct.
So you didn't flub it.
Yeah,
it was confusing.
It was, and I'm easily confused. So I think I'm just going to credit the rest of them to Seth MacFarlane
and Paul McCartney.
Seth MacFarlane is going to direct all of the rest of these.
Seth MacFarlane sounds about right to me.
So the Trek Zone, you can check that out if you want to see that interview. Had some music, the Rolling Stones, Can't You Hear Me Knockin', and America from the Last Unicorn. That's all I've got to say, as performed initially by Laura Huggins, Leighton Meester, and Scott Grimes in Lasting Impressions. This episode premiered July 7th, 2022 on Hulu. Scott Grimes got a lot of love and attention this weekend because not only was this episode very well received, his birthday was also on July 9th.
Aww.
I say also because one of the co-hosts of Mission Log the Orville also has a birthday on July 9th, which was yesterday, and that is...
Norman?
No, me.
What?
There's only 2 of us that co-host
When
Mission
was
Log the Orville.
I thought
one
you
of
said
them's
Mission
you, one of
Log
them's
Pod.
me.
Hold on. You had a birthday yesterday?
I did.
Happy birthday! You didn't tell anybody.
I kind of keep it quiet because this birthday,
I hate when people do that.
This
I hate
birthday
it.
puts me at the same age that William Hartnell was during the first season of Doctor Who. So at this point, I'm just done celebrating birthdays.
Mike,
I'm happy I made
Mike,
another lap. They're
you
kind of
can't-
victory laps at this point.
Here's the thing. Here's why I hate this. This is what I hate so much, and I've finally been able to pinpoint it. If you don't tell people it's your birthday, you
Yeah.
can't tell them it's your birthday the day after. It's not fair.
The only
You
reason
should
I
have
bring
just
it up.
kept it quiet.
The only reason I bring it up is because I think it's cool that I have the same birthday as Scott Grimes.
You just
That's it. Because I have so little to latch onto. Having the
tweet
same
about it.
birthday as Scott.
tweet about it.
as
Are you guys
Scott
the
is
same age?
Awesome. No, I'm actually 4 years older than him. So, but not in 2025. He's 6 years older than me in 2025.
There you go.
So yeah, we got that.
You got that going for you.
Yeah. So special guest cast, we had Johnny Knoxville and Jack McBrayer. I don't know what I would call that sitcom.
Well, it's so 2.5 Men is basically what they're riffing off of, kind
Yeah.
of, or The Odd Couple.
Yes, that's kind of what I got more of.
It's definitely both, right?
Yeah.
To some extent. So it could be like 2 half men.
Yeah.
Oh, what? 2 equals 1.
Yeah, exactly that. Like 2
Split
kinda like-
personalities.
yep. Yeah, I'll go with any of those.
I love Jack McBrayer so much because
And he's Badgie.
Badgie may be my favorite Star Trek character besides the beluga whales. The beluga whales really took over for my love.
And Cetacean Ops.
They were very funny to me.
Yeah.
But Johnny Knoxville is one of my early favorite people. Like I had a shirt that said I love Johnny Knoxville. He's a cool guy. I love he does a great episode on Dax Shepard's podcast. It's just so interesting to hear him talk. And
Good.
Anyway, I was really pleased by that little
Yeah.
snippet.
That was cute. Leighton Meester's back as Laura Huggins, of course. Ted Danson as Admiral Perry. Kelly
I can't
Hu.
say her name right.
Laura Huggins? Leighton Meester?
Leighton. I said
Leighton.
Leighton.
Leighton, I would say.
Well, because it's Lee.
I
People
before
say-
E, except after A.
Well, no, people
like
say
neighbor and
Lee
way.
for Leigh, I think. People do say Lee
They
for that.
do, because I
So
think it would be
Leighton.
awkward to say Lay.
Right. So I
Yes.
think it's,
And I
but
would
it is
leave it at
probably
that.
Leighton. It is probably Leighton.
Leighton. Kelly Hu as Admiral Ozawa, and Norm MacDonald as Yaphet. And then starring in the selfie, we had Ann Winters, Scott Grimes, and Peter Macon. What'd you think of that smile?
It was actually my favorite thing on the planet.
Oh, so funny.
Anna Winters, you can kind of see her do the selfie head
Yeah,
tilt, and then like they corrected it for the actual shot. Like she knew exactly. She understood the assignment. I hate that phrase, but she understood the assignment. She's like,
Right.
So anyway, it was a very funny and earned moment.
Yeah, it was definitely good.
Some really great comedy out of this episode.
Yeah, it definitely had a nice kind of back and forth about it. And I guess that upgrade to the Aronov device finally means that we really no longer need to fear the banana.
Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to say that.
Why? That's like
The whole thing.
that's comedy. That's
Here's the thing.
going back to old wounds.
I know, but I always forget that everyone's like the banana, and I'm like, I don't care.
I don't care about. There's so much more to the show than a stupid banana.
I forgot about the banana. It's a banana salad. I don't know what you want me to know here.
Does it work with any fruit?
Yeah, right. I know. And so
How about a salad?
funnily enough, I was reflecting on that scene, and I was like, wow, they really have. So they aren't doing any less or more joking than they did, or, comedy than they did in season 2. They're doing way less than they did in season 1. And that scene in particular is really indicative of how much they've shifted away. But
Right.
I also remember that the back and forth between Kelly and him is like the first time we see them getting along, and it's kind of necessary, even though it's also jokey, to see their senses of humor matching up.
And yeah, that they still yes, they still mesh. They still vibe.
Yeah. Anyway, the banana can.
Well, when there's a box set of the Orville release, and it's just the Aronoff device collection, it's going to start with Old Wounds, and it's going to end with, I think, at this point, unless they're able to fix it.
What I love is that we shot this episode is in Los Angeles. I remember being confused when we met Laura Huggins what town they were in, because I don't know that it was ever explicitly said New York, or I don't remember.
It was Saratoga Springs, New York, which is a suburb of Albany, New York.
Got it. Okay, yes, you're right. I'm wrong.
Now that's only because I'm, that's my home state. So,
but so they've migrated from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they ended up in the valley. I knew, I could have almost grown up on those streets. So that the shot where they land the shuttle, that's 100% the 118 overpass. I'm almost positive of it.
Yeah.
But my joke about it is they're downtown in the middle of the night. It's still pitch black downtown,
and then it's light out.
It just proves that it doesn't take 20 minutes to get anywhere in Los Angeles. That's
so
I
was like, yeah, because they're coming in, and there's the comment made of I've identified air traffic control and their vectors, and
how long would it take to travel that far
by
in a shuttle?
By airplane? Or, if a shuttle's going, say 300 miles an hour below 10,000 feet, kind of like an airplane is, you're talking about a matter of
seconds.
Well, minutes to get from where to where, though, to get from, like Long Beach to LAX, or from LAX to the Valley. You're talking about a matter of a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes.
Wait, how fast? The traveling 300 miles an hour. Okay.
Yeah, so you're going 5 miles a minute-ish.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't do math. That's
okay.
Yeah. Maybe it's pre-dawn. You know what I mean?
And that's what it looked like. It looked like it was. It certainly didn't look like dusk when they broke out of the clouds and saw the city. But it certainly did look like it was the early morn when they landed. So
there is no biker bar around there that I can attest to that looks like a Roadhouse-esque show.
I got the biker bar in my notes later, man. But was I the only one thinking when they walked in that Isaac was going to say, "I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycles"?
What is that from?
Terminator 2.
Oh. So that's funny that you say that. That scene in Terminator 2 is actually filmed in the only cowboy saloon left in Los Angeles, actual cowboy saloon, which is also a biker bar.
Do you think this was the same place?
No, it's not, because it definitely is a different location. But that scene, Terminator 2, was filmed at the Cowboy Palace, which is unfortunately has become a Confederation flag haven, but it was also it was a biker bar. It's where all Hell's Angels would hang out and stuff like that. So there is one very close to where they landed. It just doesn't look like that. But yeah, I used to live right across the street from there, or very close to there.
Yeah, and I noticed that in this episode, Kelly didn't look at Ed and say, "Can it be time travel?"
Could it
like she does in all the non-time travel episodes.
Because she knows, Mike.
Yeah.
She knows it's time
She knows, because she knew it was. They made it clear. I did like the time travel effect in this one. I've seen some really... if you watch Star Trek 4, and they've got, the white statues and the clouds coming out when they, boomerang around the sun. That has always taken me out of that film. First Contact, when the Enterprise chases the Borg sphere backward in time, that's actually done pretty well. But I liked that this was just kind of this buildup of energy, and then kind of what looked like warping of I'll say space-time. Not that I really know what warping of space-time looks like. And then just boom, they're back in time. I really thought that was a very effective use of visual effects.
Right. Seth MacFarlane retweeted someone's compliment to especially their speed of light travel.
I've got that in my notes later.
Well, wait. Yeah, so I think Andre Borman is definitely pulling his weight on this episode.
The tweet was from Andy Weir, who's the author of The Martian and Project Hail Mary. And we can jump back down to that a little bit later. So they arrived 10 years too late. By Gordon's been there 10 years, right? They were trying to get him maybe right as he sent that signal, or maybe right as he got back to Earth. They missed by 10 years because they ran out of Dysonium. I think was the thought. They used all their fuel and ended up not quite making the
Right.
mark. So, and I think it was a combination. This has some quantum issues also. So they got two things they got to do. They got to get Gordon, and they also got to get more Dysonium just so they can get home. And Kelly said, well, let's just go get Gordon and worry about the Dysonium, separately. And I'm thinking, are you doing that just to be jerks?
Right.
Like, because you can get the Dysonium, then go back 10 years, and then pluck Gordon out of time. And now he doesn't have to suffer through that 10 years. I guess they don't really know what he did during that 10 years, but either way, it would have saved him whatever that 10-year ordeal was. But no, we're just going to go see him right now, see how he's holding up after 10 years of being abandoned.
Yeah, it's pretty... There's a lot of moral questions.
Yeah.
And how they handled it is questionable. And the thing is like they probably don't not know what happened because on the article that they pull up about his death, it's all there.
Like I read the whole thing, like moved from suburban Connecticut. Yeah.
Also
met Laura, moved to California, started flying jets.
Speaking of cats, I think, did you see the final final thing was...
I did. In lieu of flowers, send it to... were you familiar with the cat?
It's not a real place, I don't think, because I looked it up.
Altadena. Yeah. Cat
Altadena is a real place, but I don't think it's like actual... Well, I looked it up and I didn't look hard. But I know that Seth has a cat sanctuary for stray cats and cats that need to be rehomed. It's called Perry's Place. A friend of mine got their cat from there. So make your donations to Perry's Place, folks.
That is brilliant. Brilliant. Absolutely. So they meet Gordon at the airport. And I don't know if that was Burbank or Van Nuys. You have any idea?
My guess is it's got to be... it's probably Van Nuys. It's got to be Van Nuys because Burbank's too busy. Van Nuys is not.
Yeah, I was looking for some indications that it might be Burbank, which is the
it definitely wasn't LAX.
Right.
Well, it could have been Santa Monica too.
Could have been. Yeah. Just wondering if you had some inside inside recognition of that. But the first thing the guy said, hey, if I get those TKS panels installed, you want me to do that? And Gordon's like, yeah, we can do that by the 5th. I don't know if anybody cares what a TKS panel is.
I want to know.
Telcalumet, Kilfrost, Cheap Bridge are the three companies that came up with a system that dispenses ethylene glycol, aka de-ice anti-ice fluid, through panels with thousands of holes in them along the wing and the tail to prevent or get rid of ice formation on the wings and tail of the aircraft, sometimes referred to as a weeping wing. And that's what a TKS panel is.
So cool. I love how much your knowledge has gotten to shine in this season particularly.
Yeah, there's definitely some aviation tie-ins, and I thought Gordon looked fantastic, taxiing in that aircraft with his kind of loosened up tie and the gold bars and the the lanyard around his ID that said pilot. just in case the audience didn't know. Pilot. Yep, he's the pilot. I
mean. He looked good. It suited him for sure.
It sure did. And they talked about taking him back, and he wanted to go to go home and show him something. And he wanted to show him his family and see what he's been up to for the last 10 years and kind of make his case. But the Orville vanity plate, license plate.
So Tom Costantino tweeted an actual license plate. With the Orville. I wonder if that's why they couldn't use it, because it was someone's actual.
Was it a California plate?
Yeah. And he said, congratulations to blah, 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 I don't, for actually getting this. And I bet you they wanted the Orville.
Right.
Orville. Yeah, it would have fit.
And but there are other things he could have done besides Orville. He could have done Orville or...
Orville is the joke that we all waited for.
And when he said it sounds like I'll say crappy band, the first thing I thought of, which is probably the first thing you thought of, which was O-Town, which was a boy band that was formed during the first season of Making the Band way back in 2000.
So 100% of what I thought.
They got pushed hard and went nowhere.
Yep. The band that you know their name and don't give a about. I feel like we can say because they said it in the show a lot this season.
They do. They are saying it. I don't know that.
We're gonna bleep us out. We're gonna car door sound us bleep out. Thank you.
Exactly right.
really love the stance they take on veganism.
I do too. I was really glad that he did that. He was like, yeah, you know what I did? I ate animals. I killed animals. Yeah.
And
Where I come from, I'm a criminal. Right about now, it's no big deal. Yeah.
Well, and all I can think of is they are definitely eating ham sandwiches on break, in between shots. But I love that they made a decision that the future doesn't need to murder animals. It is a moral, for me, it's a moral conundrum. Not a conundrum, it's a moral issue. I don't like shaming people about it because I think we're all on different parts of that journey.
Yes.
And some people need that protein and can't afford to be, physically can't afford to be vegan or vegetarian. So that's a different conversation altogether. But I think it's really awesome that they're like, hey, no, I mean, animals have feelings. We shouldn't be doing this. Even if it's only in the art, I still think it's really cool.
Yeah. And I think this falls more into like funny observations than messages, morals, and meanings. But Gordon, I guess we'll call him, maybe I'll call him Gordo since we're talking about that version of Gordon. When he said it's like watching your little brother make mistakes. I mean, sure, he's an idiot now, but you can see him learning and getting smarter, and you know they're going to be okay. And then that kind of goes right into sort of like Ed and Kelly the whole time they were in the 21st century, looked like they didn't want to touch anything. They just looked like they were skeeved out, grossed out, just...
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, just the entire time. But one thing
there also is I don't want to disrupt anything we're in the past.
True.
To be fair.
And the look, I couldn't tell the look that they were both sort of giving Gordon the whole time, from say the time that they met him at the airport until, the failed attempt to extract him from his house with Tala, was it looked to me like a look of disapproval and condescendingness. But there might have been some sympathy or empathy in there, but I wasn't really picking up on that. It just kind of looked like, what the fuck?
I don't know. I think I read it as two deeply conflicted, but had two deeply conflicted people.
Right.
There's also, I think that at the end of the day, they decided this is how it has to be. And this is the decision we're making. No emotional overtures are going to make us change our mind. But they're also talking about one of their best friends. And I think it was painful. So, like, in the same way that you see a little brother making a mistake, you got to let them make those mistakes. It's interesting that they use the similar analogy that Dr. Finn used when she was talking about remembering her marriage with the vice admiral.
Right. It was like looking at herself,
as a young daughter, or as a little. So it was a similar analogy, which wisdom does afford. You don't know what is being set in motion in this moment, but when you look back at 5 years, like, if I didn't do that, if I didn't lose this job, it wouldn't have given me this. And that's true with anything.
Man, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I know every single one of them led me to the place I am right now. And so sadly, or maybe not so sadly, I don't know, consequently, I'm kind of glad I made them because I'm in a pretty good place right now.
You can't change the fact that you did either.
Right.
I think.
So I look back at my past. It's like looking at somebody who was an idiot, but I got smarter and I know things worked out.
I think also the way they were looking at him is they were really trying to assess, or like they were two people who had the advantage over him, and they were looking for an in. They were looking for the crack to go, come on, you know better. Right. And like, because you can see the way Kelly approaches him when they're at the airport, and like, we're so sorry. They're legitimately sorry.
Right.
And there's an enormous weight of that has been they just feel the weight of what Gordon has been going through. And he's so right when he later on says, you guys would have made the same choice. Who knows what anyone would have done in this situation, etc. And we can definitely unpack more of that.
And I want to talk about that later because I have that later too. It just seemed like with Gordo, there was not, it didn't seem like they were showing him a lot of sympathy, because I think you're right. I think they were so deeply conflicted and they understood the potential ramifications of what he was doing. They did, however, seem to show a lot of sympathy at the end for Gordon when they had him back on the ship, and he never went through any of that stuff. He didn't really need the sympathy. It was Gordo that needed the sympathy.
I agree with why did they give him the information? Why didn't they just go, you know what, Gordon, you live here, have a good time, you know? In the event that it didn't work, in the event, you know, there's a world too that they said those things to Gordon to reinforce their stance on it too. Because especially, I'm sure you can know this as a father, how many times have you had to like course correct for somebody that doesn't want to see it, or in your neighbor? Like, it's really hard to stand your ground with someone who has emotionally reasoned their way through something, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. Emotionally
reasoned. That's a term I haven't heard before. I love it.
Well,
explains so much. Did you just coin it?
Yeah, I think perhaps. I just know that myself, because I feel things so strongly, I'm like, well, that means it's true. I'm a really hard person to argue with when that's the case, which is why therapy is really wonderful. I will say this. There's not a single one-story home in Los Angeles that has a basement. I would like to meet the art director, head of props. What kind of location scouting they must have gone through? I bet you they had to fly to a different state. Like, wow. I'm being hyperbolic, but there are no basements out here.
No kidding. Is that just because of the instability of the...
We just don't need them.
Just don't need them. Okay.
We just don't need them. There's no, recede to the floor in case there's a friggin' tornado. We just don't have buildings that have an underground, like the Cheers existing below ground is a novel idea out here that doesn't happen. I wonder if that would have been different if the subway system actually was more effective, or because we had a lot of underground transit. I don't know what the reason is. I bet you there's an element of earthquake instability being a factor. I can't speak to that education with education behind me. We just don't have it. Same thing, we don't have stoops. Most places do not have stoops out here unless it was built in an era where many stoops were being built in.
It was when all the Brooklynites moved out to LA and they had to play stoop ball.
There you go.
That's the only
but think about it. A lot of
for any 80-year-olds listening to Mission Log the Orville.
Hey,
get a little shout out to Stoop Ball.
I watched Hey Arnold, and there was stoop ball references. Okay, so I'm not totally out. Well, and if you go to Los Angeles, if you go downtown, there's amazing architecture. There was a lot of Eastern influence that came out here, East Coastal influence, I should say. We just don't have basements. So it's really funny that they luckily found the only area where Dysonium is, and there's a basement there.
And there's a basement, and I love that we're talking about I guess we'll call it the B plot. It's funny. An hour before this episode dropped, we were on Discord live with Mission Log patrons talking about last week's episode, which we drop on Wednesday nights, and then the following week the episode premieres late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, depending on where you are in your time zone. So we were talking about the potential of a Isaac, Charlie Burke sort of buddy cop adventure where they learn to appreciate each other more, and then they send the two of them on this mission. And I'm glad it didn't go that far. I'm glad it was just a little bit of mutual understanding and a little bit of maybe both sides pleading their case. But not life peril where one had to save the other, and then the all fences were mended at that point. Just a little bit of nuance and flavor, a little bit of thanks offered by Isaac, a little bit of perspective offered by Charlie.
Yeah, I'm going to agree that I think it actually strengthens my care for Isaac that he just wanted to say thank you. And it wasn't brought on because of another epiphany that he had to have. We are seeing the maturity of Isaac. I will say, for someone that spent 700 years on that multiphasic planet, he really didn't understand socialization. He really had an opportunity to learn some stuff and just... So how do you say hello to biological life forms? Dude,
So you made no small talk for
exactly,
700 years?
It's just funny to me. She said something that I had referenced before, that you don't need to be friends with people that you work with. And that's what she said. I work with you. We have to just move forward. And I still don't care for the Charlie Burke character as much as some people might. I like her more than other people probably do. And I empathize. I'm very sad for her position. I just don't want to change my position on. She's also being a little bit of she needs to move on. She needs to talk to somebody in therapy about this a little bit,
Yeah, it's nice to see the cartoonishness of her sort of showing up and just being the new person who hates Isaac, and the only one apparently who does, even though in the first episode
Gordon
they said there
doesn't.
were many.
Gordon,
but Gordon's got ulterior motives though.
Yeah, but I think that him saying he agreed with Charlie Burke in the first episode of season 3,
Right.
Solidifies his argument that happens in this episode. When has he ever been trustworthy?
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
committed a crime.
Yes,
So
and that was definitely a callback, I think. Like, oh, Isaac, we're going to listen to him?
Yeah.
And that was one of those what about arguments. Like, we're talking about you right here, right now. Like, this is the issue. And people say, what about something else? And that's not what we're talking about. That's not relevant to this conversation. And Isaac and Gordon was trying to do that what about Isaac argument that didn't hold water.
Again, emotional reasoning.
Yeah. So we talked last week a lot about we had a very deep conversation, and I think we were barely able to, there's a lot left unsaid and untalked about, I think, in A Tale of Two Topas. But I think we had a good conversation about it. And one of the things we talked about was representation across the board in the Orville. Do you feel like this episode did anything to address that?
Well, I think it is as simple as, hey, yes, we have characters that are fluid, or there's different sexualities represented, and I was so grateful. But then I also did have a conversation with a friend on one of my streams. There was some obvious acceptance of it when Seth's character hooked up with Rob Lowe's character too.
Yes.
So I did forget that there was that representation as well. So
why do you got to put everything in a box, Jessica? Bang, get banged. Why do you got to, come on.
It's just I think I could have seen that relationship a mile away, but I also just didn't know what their relationship was. So I think it's interesting that she hadn't told Amanda her feelings. I think it's interesting. It's just interesting. And yeah, it's just nice to see that it doesn't need to be an alien metaphor to see the representation, was the only criticism.
That's a really, really good point. So I'm glad we got this B plot a little bit to sort of bring those two characters together. But a couple of things. Number one, they've got a cloaked shuttle somewhere, and they're walking 26 kilometers, and their best option is to bet her good honor. Apparently, I don't know what that guy would have chosen in the bar.
We all know.
But she said, "We lose, you choose," and that's a better bet than just walking back to the shuttle and taking the cloaked shuttle over to the thing and get the other stuff that they're trying to get. And I say this for this reason. While that was kind of like a little bit of comic relief and a little bit of another story of things coming together, what I would have liked to see is more of Gordon. I would have liked to see, kind of like in The Inner Light, where Jean-Luc Picard lived that whole life inside one episode, and we got to know his wife and his friends and his kids and his grandkids, and we were just heartbroken at the end of that episode. I would have maybe liked to see a little bit more of Gordon, growing desperate in a shack in Connecticut, and maybe and maybe meeting Laura, and maybe going out to LA, and maybe proposing, and maybe those sorts of things. Because I think we had the time. I mean, they were able to do it in a 45-minute episode in The Inner Light. It would have been, I think, more impactful at the end of the episode if we really, really got to know maybe Laura a little bit more. Who, between the two episodes, we really don't. You know, we know she's pretty. We know Gordon's smitten with her. We know she's competitive at Pictionary, and we know she blew him off because she wanted to get back with Greg. That's about it. And then all we got was the story of, you know, how they met. So I would have liked to see more Gordon, because I do think the bar scene, the biker bar scene, was easily avoidable by just taking a shuttle ride across town. And it's not like they don't have a cloaked shuttle. They can cloak the shuttle.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you at all, and I won't. I also made the connection between The Inner Light and this episode. I love the Inner Light episode. I think you'd have to be cold-hearted to not, and it's an impactful episode. And when I think about Othin, I will say this: I don't think we needed more. I can understand wanting more with Gordon and Laura. I think that ultimately I was just really glad to have them back together one more time.
And we talked about it early on. I don't know if it was a supplemental, but we talked about it before of how or if we're going to get Laura back on the show. Yeah. And you were like, well, you know, we don't want to do another simulation because that would just be creepy at this point. And I was like, yeah, it sure would be. I mean, just walk in there and delete Greg, baby. But then, of course, she's no fun anymore. All she wants to do is sell handbags at Macy's, and, you know.
There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not who she is.
No, there's nothing wrong with that, but she lost the passion for her music and to do other things. So it was, yeah, I would have definitely liked to see more, but it was great to have her back.
I hear you.
Like you mentioned. So how chilling to you was it when, and a show that is just sort of, you know, very, very, is scored very strongly. I don't think there was any music when Ed, Kelly, and Tala showed up at the door. Like, it was just chilling. And just very matter of fact, you're going with us. No,
because you know what that means. If Tala's there.
If Tala's there, he's going by force.
Yeah. It was just a hard, sad scene moment, all of it. I agree with you. I think it probably did drop out. I think knowing when to score and when not to score is just as important, you know?
100%.
But then you have the heartbreaking music when he goes back into the house to talk to Laura and Ed.
And I did skip ahead a little bit because I didn't want to talk about the scene where Gordon was explaining himself, kind of in that little nursery, spare bedroom kind of area, you know, and he said, I was 3 years, okay? 3 years in there, and I decided to go out. We're social creatures. We need people or we die. And he talked about finding Laura and moving out there and having a life, and union law doesn't matter anymore, and he's not Ed's lieutenant anymore, and he's not his helmsman. And then we see Gordon with his back to the door and Ed and Kelly facing the door, and we see Laura standing there with the door open for an unprescribed period of time. And that's when I often ask my friends, why couldn't you just tell me that my wife was standing behind me? How long was she standing behind me?
She just walked in. I don't think she was standing behind. Just to be fair, I think she just walked in.
Okay, it sounded like she heard a lot.
Listen, I think you could hear a lot from the other room, because it's the child's room, and there's also could be a child's monitor. We have no idea.
Right.
I don't think. Also, subtlety was not in their best interest.
She's standing behind me, isn't she?
She's standing behind me, isn't she? There's something in your teeth. Just so you know, I'm the kind of friend who's going to be like,
Yep.
Karen.
Karen, nice. Yeah. But it was. Andy Weir on Twitter said, I have to give mad props to the Orville for their recent handling of time travel. They used actual Einsteinian physics to go forward in time via time dilation, and they even showed the stars blue shifting in front and red shifting behind as they traveled near light speed. So that's an explanation.
I don't know what that means, but good for them.
So the faster you go, the closer you go to light speed, the slower time travels for you traveling at that speed. So if I'm traveling great distances at near light speed, it may only seem like a couple of minutes to me, but it could be like 400 years to other people. And that's how that worked.
But how come the colors, I guess?
The colors. So when you look at light and you are traveling towards a light wave, and you are traveling towards that light wave sort of compresses to a shorter wavelength, which is blue, and we are traveling away, the light waves sort of stretch out as you travel, and they become red light waves, which is a longer light wave.
There we go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, folks.
Good job, Andre Bormanis.
Good job.
Is really what we're here to say. One last observation. Charlie Burke. First of all, the guy negging her, it makes me so mad. He's like, oh, you use a straight bourbon. I would have kicked him in the balls. Because it's just not even like, what are you saying? A woman. But the thing is like 100% dudes are still like that. Mm-hmm. But once they get they get the motorcycles, and then she downs the drink, and then they hit the road.
So a couple of things on that, because there was some words said on that on social media, and it was like, oh, she's just drinking and then getting right on a motorcycle. I guess drinking and driving isn't a big thing where she comes from. First of all, she said she's from Texas, and pretty sure that drinking and driving is not a big thing. Just kidding to my Texas friends. But first of all, she had one, and I don't want to condone drinking and driving, but she said, I'll have two of those. He poured two. She took a sip, and then she finished it. So she had one drink. One drink does not put you above the legal limit. You are still safe to ride a motorcycle after one alcoholic drink, according to state law in all 50 United States, as well as probably most of the world, I would think.
I understand. I just don't think we needed to see her do it.
But she's from Texas.
I just think it's not a great representation, is all. That's all. I just don't think you need to see it.
And on Mission Live the Orville, we do not condone drinking and driving. So point well taken. So we've come to the part of the show where we explore the big ideas in the episode twice in a lifetime and discuss the meanings, morals, and messages to see if they align with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. So, Jessica, what are your thoughts on maybe some of the heavier topics, messages, morals, meanings? First of all, let me ask you this: would this make you think this would have made the Great Bird of the Galaxy, Gene Roddenberry? Is this the kind of show he would have maybe put out or condoned or put a stamp of approval on? Do you think?
I think that the Orville, the creator of the Orvilles, the writers, the storytellers of the show, are not afraid to tell the hard versions of the story. And I think Gene Roddenberry could respect that. We've seen them time and time again not make a pretty bow resolution on every action. Mm-hmm. I think even early Star Trek did their best to do a pretty bow. How do we resolve this? TNG even did a lot to let's just make sure we have a pretty nice resolution on this as much as possible. Last
3 minutes. Now, there are those kind of what I call the let's get the hell out of here episodes. And that comes from City on the Edge of Forever, right? The travel having time. McCoy saves Edith Keeler. That keeps the United States from entering World War II, which allows Germany to rise to power, unencumbered by U.S. encumbrance. And the future is timeline is kind of wiped out. The Federation's wiped out, all that stuff. So they go back and Edith Keeler must die. Kirk, however, fell in love with her, and at the end of that episode, all he had to say was, after restoring the timeline, was, "Let's get the hell out of here." Like this was in some ways kind of a let's get the hell out of here, but I'm going to prove with sound logic and time travel expertise that there is maybe a silver lining around this ending of this show. But yeah, so City on the Edge Forever. There seemed to be this, and maybe just because we haven't been in this situation before, I think the only other time travel that we did was past Kelly coming forward, right? Past
Well,
Kelly
no,
coming
we
forward.
had Priya.
Sure. Oh, yeah, we had Priya, too. There just seemed to be a lot more mention of temporal law
Right.
in this episode than they ever talked about before. Maybe just it's being sorted out.
I think
as
so.
we
This is
speak.
what I think, if I remember correctly. Let's just delete the Priya conversation because she was coming from the future to the past.
Mm-hmm.
It was a portal that they found and destroyed. And did they remember her? Did they not? That's not important. It's just a good episode, and you could just. That's all that really matters.
Yeah.
But when you start dealing with the air knob device and Kelly coming from the past, they say they're not sure what the implications are. So they even said, like, we don't know how time travel works. Could this be multiple universes or whatever? Again, some of this stuff is so confusing that, like Ed said, my head starts to hurt.
One of the things I loved about how they handled it in this show, and much like Ed in Not a Road Not Taken, but the one before that, was when he said, I would rather chew broken glass than discuss the details of time travel or something along those lines. We don't know how this works. They don't know how it works. And I love that they were very, very truthful. Nobody knows how this works, right? There's the Back to the Future. There's, to me, I really liked how they explained it in the, in Endgame. The Avengers Endgame, I thought was a great explanation of it.
But they also had multiple Well, actually, it's so confusing because
it is.
It's
but
so
here's
much.
Yeah, but we don't know how it works, and I think they're being very careful because, admittedly, they don't know how it works, and I think that was a wonderful way to kind of be all-encompassing with the we don't know how it works.
I think they have a better idea of how it works now, which is that's what I think John was trying to get at. They had pretty good, which is why they had to go get him, which is why they had to keep the timeline intact. Because basically, from what I understood, there are no split universes right now. There is one universe.
Well,
from the way that they set it up.
What John said was, what Isaac said was if John had failed to follow through and send that sandwich back in time, he would have created a paradox. And Isaac said, and a paradox, that means that a new universe would branch off right here all because of a sandwich, was how he put it.
Right.
So if there's a paradox, then a new universe branches off, a new timeline branches off. So let's talk about that just a little bit, because they picked up Gordon before he sent the signal.
Right.
But the signal was still received by the Orville. That, my friends, is a paradox. And according to John Lamar, an entirely new universe would branch off. A universe that, in my mind, would allow Gordon to send the signal, which the Orville got. He finds Laura, marries her, has babies, lives out the rest of his life, watching Jack McBrayer and Johnny Knoxville reruns,
right,
albeit in an alternative universe. So because of that paradox that was created by picking up Gordon, quote unquote, too early, now we have Gordon and Laura living happily ever after, thanks to that paradox.
If that's what happened, though, Lamar offering the warning, John Lamar offering the warning that this is going to create a paradoxical event, that did not seem like something they wanted to do. And temporal law was something that they were so worried about that they couldn't have done that without addressing it. They wouldn't have got. It's just a very interesting thing. If they had known that they had created a split universe, they would have been like, "Oh, well, we can't do that. Fast forward 6 months."
now let's create another one. I think no matter what they did on this, there was a potential for unintended consequences.
Here's what I think. It's a GD TV show. I don't care. I really liked this episode. Because you could also make the argument that any sort of minor depletion of dysonium, not just to affect the fault lines in California, which, by the way, are very dangerous to begin with. I wonder, if only not the
disclaimer:
water.
we at Mission Log the Orville do not condone messing with the fault lines in California.
Right, very important. I mean, it's already going to happen. Just don't make it worse. But even taking that little bit of dysonium could have affected where it was discovered or how much of it was discovered. They could have everything they did screwed with temporal law. So,
yes, even Gordon driving Ed and Kelly home. Anyway, whatever. I guess that was all changed anyway. But you're right. That dysonium is a better example.
It's not. It's just not a clean time. Time travel is real tough.
And I love that they said it. Probably how many times did they say we don't know how this works in this episode?
That's
6?
good. That's good.
That's good. I love that they did that.
Here's what I like. We got a really beautiful episode with a character that we really loved. Mm-hmm. And got to see Scott Grimes be in love with someone he loved. And then they ripped our heart out.
I don't think they did.
They did, but if you
not in my headcanon.
If you think that he's still together, then you are a happy peach.
I am a happy peach.
I want that world. I want to live in the world where he stays there. But then even more so, they should have never said, we're taking you back.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, it was just so why did they do that part then? I mean, granted, they want. Well, I could see how they were like, okay, and I could see how Kelly was like, okay, he's been doing damage for 10 years. We need to get out of there now and stop him from doing any more damage. So I definitely do get that. I do want to talk about this because I found this was kind of interesting from a couple of guys, man, hanging out in Los Alamos. Want to hear about it?
Yeah.
Nikolai Sinitsyn, a theoretical physicist, and Ben Yan, a postdoc in the Center for Nonlinear Studies at Los Alamos National Laboratory, authored a paper called Recovery of Damaged Information and the Out-of-Time Ordered Correlators. It was riveting, but I only read the cliff notes. They used a quantum computer to simulate time travel and demonstrated that in the quantum realm, there is no butterfly effect. In the research, information qubits, or quantum bits, that's our portmanteau of the day. Qubits.
Oh my God.
Time travel to the simulated past. One of them is then strongly damaged, like stepping on a butterfly, metaphorically speaking. Surprisingly, when all the qubits return to the present, again, this is a computer simulation, they appear largely unaltered, as if reality is self-healing. Quote from Nikolai Sinitsyn, on a quantum computer, there is no problem simulating opposite in time evolution or simulating running a process backwards into the past. So we can actually see what happens with a complex quantum world if we travel back in time. Add small damage and return. We found that our world survives, which means there is no butterfly effect in quantum mechanics. That's this paper. It's interesting. If something like this interests you, there's a lot of research being done in the area.
It does interest me. Because I think more accurately, probably there are multiple universes or parallel universes. That's probably more accurate. But what I do like about this episode is that they tried to set up some sort of law and tried to adhere to it as best as possible. Yeah. Also, while saying, we don't really know.
So to me, it was one of those things where they got there, maybe for whatever reason, They took the time to set up that sort of law in the beginning of the show that if there is a paradox, a new timeline branches off. We have a paradox, which to me would mean that a new timeline would branch off. And then we have Happy After Ever, Gordon and Laura. And I think that makes me happy.
I think if that's what was intended, then we would have known that that's how it ended.
Hey, but it's art, and we get out of it. What's up to the admirer, right? The beholder.
I'm with you, and that gives you even more hope for season 4, and somehow she comes back into play. I really am excited. Yeah. I'm excited.
It could be awesome.
I think the possibility for storytelling is endless, and no matter what, it's just a TV show, folks, and it doesn't really matter that much.
Maybe this turns into the Orville's version of the mirror universe.
Totally, I'm down to see.
I would think it would be better. I would think it would be a better universe.
An evil Ed Mercer with,
Yeah, it'd be tough to think, because you got Gordon there, and he's a smart guy, and he probably helped kind of usher some things in, and maybe talked a few of his friends into being, eating, killing less animals and stuff like that. Maybe had a couple of scientific breakthroughs and stuff, because he was a talented flight engineer, as we know, and a cat lover. So
lover.
we have that. Want to move on to messages, morals, and meanings?
I think so. There's so much to talk about this episode. Obviously, I think we have to draw a line somewhere.
Okay. The line must be drawn here.
Did we talk about how important it is to be social creatures?
I don't think so. I think we mentioned it in passing, but no, I think that is one of the things that is at the crux of this episode. Gordon said he tried. He was like, I tried. I did the right thing. I did my duty. I lived in an abandoned shed in Connecticut for 3 years, living off grubs, puddle water, and using his plasma pistol to
kill animals.
To kill rabbits.
Is the only reasonable reason why you should eat meat, by the way, is if you literally are living off the land. But I digress.
Right. So you mentioned that, and then and the social animal aspect of it. This film was shot during the pandemic, right? I mean, I was locked up with my wife and kids. Like, it was like if anything, there was enough social interaction for me. I would say just the right amount. I didn't want any more, but I didn't want any less. Anyway, having said that, there were people that were locked up by themselves for months and months and months. And that was, I think, very, very timely during the creation of the story.
I think it was really cool to see them go, you knew the pandemic was, I didn't even realize why they chose 10 years from now, where in a hopeful world, the pandemic's over. I think this is something that Seth said, and I think it's important to acknowledge. They did their gosh darndest to make sure they didn't have an outbreak there.
Yeah.
And they really succeeded. So,
they did. And I still think, going forward, it's going to be like the weather report. Like, hey, folks, COVID cases are up in your area. If you can work from home, go ahead and do it. If you go out, put a mask on, maintain social distance.
The second it becomes not a pandemic, they will all fix that. Yeah, totally.
Right. So you talked about that social aspect, that human beings are social creatures, and if we're alone, we die. Well, that rule was made by people that have never been, that temporal law, that rule was made by people that have never been lost in time, that have never had to live through this. And like many people who make rules, they don't necessarily have the wisdom or the foresight to know what it's like to be on the front lines. And I think that was really sort of at, in some ways, at the core of this episode. Gordon was thrust into a situation. There were rules made for that situation that nobody, as far as I know,
had to adhere to.
In the Union had to adhere to. And he was the first one.
I don't blame him for what he did. You know what I mean?
I think at a certain point it was inevitable. It really was. It was either that, or he would have to at some point just kind of Isaac his way out of there. So, also, people are tough. Science, medicine, nutrition make gains. We exercise, we work hard. We try to slow the downward slide, but Father Time is undefeated, man. And, eventually it's going to get us all. And I love the line that Gordon sat down with Edward Jr. and his wife and said, this family is stronger than time. And that's why that line being so powerful, that to me, along with the kind of apparent, I'll say, paradox that was created, means to me that timeline continued and that family survived.
I will say this. Love is just like anything, an energy exchange. And if we want to look at it in one of the ways that I believe love exists, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
They should put that in a song.
Nah.
Nah, not going to do it?
Nah. I think the energy that they created with the love for each other still exists somehow.
I think so. I think it does.
Especially because Ken and Ellie experienced it.
Right. And they saw it.
They saw it, they experienced it.
Alrighty, well, I'm going to suggest that you and I virtually down 3 bottles of bourbon.
Yeah.
And
straight bourbon, though, honey.
Hey, I work in Texas.
All right. Mission Log the Orville is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Technical production by the unstoppable Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcast.roddenberry.com. Cheers, Mike.
If you'd like to be part of the conversation on the Mission Log Discord, you can become a patron at patreon.com/missionlog. Close enough. They know what it is.
Patreon is great.
Patron.
Pay us money.
A patron at patreon.com.
Patron.
Hey.
There we go. We got there.
Join us next time on Mission Log the Orville as we discuss From Unknown Graves. Dun dun
Duh.
dun dun dun.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.